Thank you, Chairman, for your introduction. I'm delighted and proud and privileged to be here at what clearly is the launch of your chapter, Globe India. In fact, the three people are from Brits, who are almost, I think, supposed to be the chapter from Britain. You could tell the difference. We walked in suits and ties. It takes us back almost to that historical moment when they said of the Brits here that only the English, the mad dogs and the English go out in the midday sun. It still seems to be our practice and our custom. But nevertheless, there is a long association between our two countries. And I'm delighted that I should be here tonight to see the launch of your chapter on probably the most important issue facing the world today, that of global change and the fact of climate change. Undoubtedly, that is the biggest challenge for us. And it doesn't matter where you live in this world. If we don't do something about challenging this change that is taking place in the climate and with its extreme weathers, it's not only the climate change that will be affected, our economy, our political systems, our social systems are threatened by this very fundamental change. It is a global problem. It requires a global solution. And that's why I'm delighted to be here today. Now, I was asked to come here today because I've not been actively involved in Globe. I come from the Council of Europe. That is a group of European nations, more than the European Union, 47 nations right throughout Europe who are concerned about climate change and believe that you need solidarity, and believe also that it's a time that the parliamentarians played a greater role in the decisions to be taken, that we will have to explain to the electorate why these decisions need to be taken. Not an easy task, but one that is the great challenge for the parliamentarians on this matter. It's true there are many other issues than just the climate change affecting global. We have a crisis in energy prices, in food prices, in commodities. These are all global problems that are all coming at the same time when we have to find a solution to these global problems. And therefore I'm invited to make a contribution about my experiences in trying to deal with some of these problems. I was delighted to be here with Suresh because we first met, and I hope I'm not disclosing a secret, but when he first came to see me, he had been appointed the Environment Minister. And he sounded a little bit disappointed. He wanted to be an industry minister. And you know, I said, this is the most important issue, will have more consequences than simply making decisions about the industry. And I hope he feels, and from his speech, he knows that is the important issue. And I therefore give you my observations this evening based upon my experiences in that field. Since, first of all, the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, when we had to come to an agreement there. I approached it as the Deputy Prime Minister. Tony Blair told me to go out as a trade union negotiator and find an agreement. That means use a bit of heavy sort of thing. So we go out there, and also whilst there, I had the experience of being the minister that was responsible for implementing the policies that we agreed at Kyoto. That's another important one. It's all right having the grand design globally, but if you don't get the policies right in your own national parliaments affecting your own national economies, then all the global solutions in the world will not work. And that's what this is about here, this global approach, a combination of solidarity of policies that can deal with these particular problems. And it's from that experience, really, I make my comments and what I think are the recommendations. In the Council of Europe, I am now what they call the rapporteur on environment on Kyoto matters. That means that I try to push policies that we believe in our parliamentarians in the Council of Europe, that we try to do that at Copenhagen, a disastrous COP you might say, or at Cancun, or the coming one at Durban, where the agreement is, once you have a framework, you thrash out the details about the money, about deforestation, all these things that are necessary to achieve the lower carbon situations that we all have to deal with. Now, in those circumstances, I could say, turning those COPs, there are a number of impressions I have on it. I hear people say, and it was the Americans first, who opted out of Kyoto, who thought they could veto it by just saying Mr. Bush, who didn't believe in the science, decided he didn't want to be in Kyoto. Mr. Obama did believe in the science, but can't do anything about it, seems to be the case. A very important lesson, because we cannot allow one country, whoever they are, to veto agreements and policies to deal with climate change. Very important issue as we now come to find the agreement that will replace Kyoto 1, which goes on to 1912. Are you leaving me now then? I hope you got the quote. He obviously didn't understand what I was saying, but anyway. Is that the big program, leaving? Anyway, leaving that aside. So, keeping with the issue, that therefore, what we're in, people, the Americans said, you can't have growth and you can't have jobs if you have climate change. In the 10 years under Tony Blair and the Labour government, we had a 30% growth in the economy. We had reduction in inflation and interest rates. We had 2 more people back at work, and 18% reduction in gas. You can do it if you have the political will to do it. And that's the lesson, one of the lessons I would say. The tragedy was that the COP agreements, where in the conference of the parties we all meet to thrash out the details, which you don't actually do at the big conferences, I must say that the Copenhagen one was rather disastrous, because a few leaders thought that all you had to do was get the leaders at the conference and come to an agreement. And then when you don't do that, you spend blaming each other. And Copenhagen, in that sense, was a difficulty. But what it did agree, they should move from a legal agreement, because what we did at Kyoto was it only applied to the rich developed countries. And if it hadn't been for China and India, we wouldn't have got that agreement. Why? Because China and India said, let the richer countries see if they can deliver what they promise. And now is the time, as we come to the end of the period of the first Kyoto on 2012, there were some achievements, some have not done as well. But you know, I'm a man that believes in a small step for mankind is quite useful. The big steps, sometimes you fall on your face. What we must do, and this is an important point, if we're to move to the new Kyoto 2, you've got to keep the principles of Kyoto. And what were those principles about? That there has to be fairness, that the burden has to be shared, that the developing countries are desperately growing in their economies, want to relieve the unemployment, want to actually reduce the poverty. And any system that comes about must recognize the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. That means rich countries have to recognize that whilst they poison the world, their low carbon must come not at the expense of the developing countries, who must go through their processes, hopefully at a lower carbon rate. So these are the kind of challenges. They are the Kyoto principles. And the message I would like to leave with you tonight, and the purpose perhaps of the chapters working together in solidarity of the parliamentarians, is we are approaching 2012. Why is that significant? It's significant because in 2012 is the end of the period that we decided on the Kyoto. There's only 14 months away, and you all know that the different complex negotiations now going on will not be completed in the next 14 months. And what I fear most, and what my organisation, the Council of Europe, feel, is that those who believe, frankly like America, who believe they don't want a Kyoto principle, they want to use that as an excuse, in my view, to say Kyoto is finished, let's start renegotiating again. We must not allow that to happen. And therefore, what we can do something. Let's practice a bit of European. You know, the European nations, when they came together, they had to negotiate all these very complex situations. And they found then they couldn't finish in time for the date they'd set. So somebody came up with a brilliant idea: stop the clock. Stop the clock, that's my campaign slogan now. Stop the ruddy clock, don't destroy the deal. So at the 2012, when we go to Bonn, when we go to actually the next one in Rio, the next one's going to be in Durban and then Rio, make clear that we're not prepared to tolerate that you actually say Kyoto's a failure. It had its difficulties. What do you expect from the most comprehensive negotiations and difficulties where you're getting 186 nations to agree? In Kyoto 1, it was only 47 nations, and America and Australia couldn't have come along with that, though I see Australia's back in. So the message I want to say, and it's a political one, we as parliamentarians must make sure that what we're fighting for are the principles that are in that Kyoto formula. And it must stay there. If we can't meet the date, well, keep on negotiations. Keep on going, say, to 2015, which is embodied in the Cancun Agreement, the possibility we look at 2015. But politically, governments will say, oh, we can't get an agreement. And then all those forces who don't believe in change, and many of them from the business sector, will come out of the woodwork and say it's failed. We must not allow that to happen. That are crucial. And let me give you a good example in conclusion. At Copenhagen, one of the things that upset it was the American negotiator who came and said, and a man called Todd Stern, he said, China produces 25% growth, a lot more than gases, a lot more than India, of course, and so does America. They said that's not a moral question, that is an arithmetical question. Namely, we both cut by 5 or 10%. But if you take into account common but differential responsibilities, if you take into account per capita arguments, then all of a sudden, even on the Chinese side, you find that they are 5% or 6% on per capita, and America is 20 tons per person. You have to have equity. You have to have consensus. I call it social justice, and that's what's embodied in the principles of Kyoto. And therefore, what you must do, and this is the message I leave with you tonight, politically, we're the politicians, we must discuss it politically. Don't get too caught up with the ruddy logic of what's possible. Our job is to have vision. Our job is to feel there must be change. Our job is to keep to those principles, because we represent people. And the mass of these people in this world are living on less than $2 a day. I don't have to say that to you in India or in China. We are wedded to that concept. And that's what we have to do. And what the developing world has to recognize, that they have the rich, and it's their job now to give the better and carry the heaviest burden, in order to allow the relieving of poverty and unemployment and the standards of living facing the majority in our world today. Because the reality, even for the richer countries and developed, if you don't get a solution to that, they'll be hit as well. Everybody will be hit. Nobody will be free from the damage of this unless we stop this rise in the climate. So I wish you well in the chapter here in India. I do wish you well, because I want you to see India, in my mind, has not played a fuller part as it could play in this. Come in. Don't just look, you've only 2 or 3% gas emissions yourself and you look to your policies. Join in with the world. Join in to make sure there needs to be social justice in this country, and that's what these chapters are about. And I want to congratulate Globe, because the work they've done in here is to show what's going on into the other countries of the world, and to expose the propaganda you can't find a solution. It might not be the most perfect one, but it's a start. It's solidarity. It's parliamentarians. And we have to shove our governments to make sure they go in that direction and join up in the solidarity at the conferences. And Global has built an organisation over the world that come here at the right time to make sure we get it right at Durban, to make sure we keep the international principles that are embodied in the Kyoto principles. So I wish you well and look forward to meeting you and seeing you at the conferences. Thank you.